The RCMP Heritage Centre is a not-for-profit charitable organisation mandated to share the story of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. This is one of those stories, part of your heritage.
Well, I was connected with the Mounted Police by accident, actually. I was working in the city office in Weyburn. I worked my way up from typing out light and water bills for every month. And then I graduated up to tax clerk, and we also had the hospitalization office in there. But downstairs in the City Hall was the detachment for the Mounted Police. So they had to provide, they were policing Weyburn, and so they had to bring all their fines up to our office, and of course, being a cashier for all those other things, well, we got to know them real well. We always knew when there was a new guy in town. And many of the Mounted Police, they married either nurses, telephone operators, or people that lived in, that worked in the City Hall. So I was one of the City Hall girls. So I didn't get to know Bill right away, but finally, with a group of us, well, we managed to snare a few of these Mounted policemen, and a few of us married them. And it was in 1954 that Bill had already been transferred out of Weyburn, but we still kept close contact. And so in 1954, I was married. We had a red serge wedding, and of course you have to have it when it's not busy, so ours was in July. And all these guys in red serge, and it was 100-degree temperature, and they just about died in the heat. But that was our wedding. And then we went on our honeymoon. We came up to Regina, and we stayed at the old Champs Hotel on Railway Avenue. But we had to get back to Weyburn because all these people were there from out of town. My aunt and uncle were there from Calgary. So nobody believed that we came up to Regina to spend the night when we were back in Weyburn the next day. But for our honeymoon, we borrowed, he was Bob's car, Bob Schrader, because he was one of the people that had a car at that time. And so we went to Regina Beach and Fort Cotepa. We did the circle of the beaches, and that was our honeymoon.
Well, I met Ivan at a dance at the YWCA, the only one either one of us ever went to. And I don't know. I think he was looking for a wife. Anyway, he took me home that night, and my mother said, who brought you home? And I said his name was Ivan Thue, but it can't be because it's spelled Thue. And she was so excited. She said, yes, it can be. He's from Langham. And she knew his aunt. They had lived there at one time. We were married in '48. We went to Vancouver for a couple of years, but Ivan had a yen to go back north. So back north we went, 1950, and we went to Arctic Red River. Oh, we went home on holidays first, and then we went to Edmonton, and we had to wait there for a while because we went north on a DC-3 with bucket seats, and I was so nervous. I'd never flown anywhere before. But anyway, we went to Norman Wells, and Norman Wells MPL picked us up with a police plane, a Norseman, very noisy, had pontoons, and then we went on to Arctic Ridge River. But anyway, we came to this detachment. It was built in 1924 by a couple of RCMP fellows. And it was a pretty solid house. The cupboards were made out of packing cases, and the floor was all that brown linoleum. And there was no Chesterfield. We had a borrowed one from the Hudson Bay. They'd thrown it out. But anyway, it wasn't too bad, except it didn't have one leg. And we put a tin under that, a coffee tin or something. And we got settled in. There was no washing machine, no electricity, and no fridge. We melted ice for both drinking and laundry. We had this, they sent in a hand washing machine. The fellow before I'd asked for a gas one, but they didn't send a gas one. When the boat came in, we had this hand washer, and it had a handle that went back and forth like this, and Ivan broke it immediately. And then we had some axe handles that he also went through. But anyway, we had the wringer and a wash tub.
So after that, we were transferred. Bill had already gone to Bengoff, and that's where I got my first time away from home. I had lived at home all the time, but we weren't too far from Weyburn, so anytime the police car was going to Weyburn, guess who the passenger was? Whether we're supposed to be there or not, I don't know, but I was there. And I think the dentist, he made Bill come for a lot of dental appointments that maybe he didn't need, because he always had an excuse to go to Weyburn. And also, when we came into Regina, I would always go in the car too. Well, this lifestyle took us to a house that had no running water. And we had a big garbage container in the back hall, and that was where our drinking water was delivered. And the cistern was in the basement, but it was below ground level. And they had also had a coal chute in there. And so everything was real black with all this soot. But then finally, well, Bill he wanted to have a little bit of water in the house. So we did get it where we had one of those old-fashioned toilets that had to be emptied. That was the closest thing we got to having running water. I think there was water in the tap, though, that we could wash dishes and stuff. But I had been used to going to the laundromat. But of course, when we got married, we had to buy a wringer washer. So I would come to the kitchen and you heat the water. And that's how I went back in ages to a wringer washer.
We had the office in the house when we got there. And also we had a prisoner. His name was Crutches. There was nobody there with him, but he stayed around anyway. And he always wore this bandana around his neck. And he said that he got this terrible toothache. And he said to Ivan, well, will you pull my tooth? And Ivan said, well, you didn't know how to pull teeth. And he says, well, the guy that was here before you did. So we found a book and gave him a block injection and pulled his tooth. And I assisted them. He lined up all these tools. There was lots of dental tools there. And we gave him tomato can to spit in. But anyway, Ivan pulled this tooth, and he said to Crutch, did it hurt? And he said, yeah, it really hurt, but I'm tough.
The detachment had a fairly good size office, and there was a separate door for it. And the house part was, the kitchen connected the office part to the rest of the house. But our furnace that they finally put in there was a big register in the center of the living room floor. So there was only one register. That was the warmest part of the house. But when the phone would ring, well, it was out in the office, and when Bill was out on calls, well, I was the one that answered the phone, being the only other person around on a one-man detachment. There was a cell there, but it wasn't used too much when we were there. But the windows were right by where the phone was. Well, this one time, one of the first calls that came, I went out. I was in bed. It was in the morning, and I answered the phone, and I looked up, and here's a guy standing out just outside the window where I was answering the phone here. I just went in my nightgown. I just didn't expect to see anybody there. That was a real awakening. And I wasn't used to seeing people in overalls. Being a city girl, well, you just never saw that. And everybody that came, because it was ranches all around Bengoff, so people didn't, overalls was the dress of the day. And then another time, like we only had a radio that came in. You couldn't talk on it. So there's broadcasts 9 in the morning, 4 in the afternoon. So anytime Bill wasn't there, that was my duty to write down all the messages that were coming in, because there was no contact after hours. The telephone office had closed at 8 o'clock at night. And so we didn't have to worry about the telephone ringing during the night, because nobody could get a hold of us. And it was very interesting. And if we were working outside, the telephone operator lived a couple of blocks down, but there was nothing in between. And so she yelled, "Get in there and answer your phone." So we were always aware of what was going on if we were in the house or in the yard and she could see us. And then I think the worst part was this not having any communications at night. Bill would team up with Radville, Sil Lawton and Radville, and they make their usual night patrols. But I could always hear that car coming into town when he'd come home, because they had to meet part way and go around to all the elevators, and that was a regular thing that was done. And that's the only contact you had with another detachment. And I think we were very well accepted in the community, so it wasn't that much of a change as far as people were concerned. And the former policeman, he was the garage operator there. He took over a garage business, so he lived just across the street from us. And quite often people would go to him rather than going to Bill, because they knew him from before. But that finally changed when they got kind of used to us. And Bill was always active in the Legion, and so I joined the Legion Auxiliary when I was there. So that was our social part in with the rest of the crowd. And we were friends of they had a theater there, and we were friends of them, so we went to every show. I mean, they let us in free, so that was one of the perks, and we were quite friendly with the operators of the shows. But that mostly was the entertainment. We did have one Christmas Eve or New Year's Eve party at our place. We We had benches all set out in the living room because we didn't have enough chairs for a whole bunch of people. But that was very good. And also the doctor and his wife, she was a former figure skater from Regina here, one of the DeWitt twins. People will know who they were, anybody that lived in Regina. And so she started up figure skating class. And so I helped her out because I was involved in Weyburn with the figure skating clubs. And we put on carnivals and everything in Weyburn. So I kind of looked after the costumes. We rented the costumes for the ones in Bengoff. And so I had all those costumes in the veranda of our house, of the detachment house. And we had to kind of fit them to the kids. But that was a nice experience. The carnival was real good. But I did have a movie camera, but it really didn't take very good pictures in a big rink. So, and there was a curling rink there, so we were involved in the curling.
And then he went on a patrol once when we were in Arctic Red River, and his knee, well, it was my fault, I guess. He had a bad knee anyway, but we'd gone for a dog team ride, and I didn't know I was driving. He didn't tell me, and I upset him. And anyway, he went on this patrol, and then his knee was bothering him, and he ended up in the hospital there. And here I am back in Arctic Red River all by myself. But anyway, he arranged for Mike Zubko, who had the flying service, to come and pick me up. So I did go to a Aklavik after 2 or 3 days, and had a lovely time there because he'd made friends there from the time he'd been there before. And then when we were transferred to Aklavik in February of that year, and we didn't have much to move. We just heard we were moving, and we moved. That was it. And there was a sergeant, and there were 3 houses there. And two of our children were born there. I had to walk to the hospital because there was no other way to get there. Made it on time both times. And it was a good life. There was a curling rink in Aklavik. I haven't always participated in curling. I didn't too much because I was pregnant quite a bit at the time. But and he was in charge of vital statistics in Aklavik, so he registered our 2 sons. His name's on their birth certificates.
From there, we went over to Fillmore. And that was the same situation with a small little office. Small is very descriptive because you could sit in the chair and you could just wheel from one desk to the other. There was no room there at all, but it did have a separate door. And the house was a larger house with a 2nd story, and it had a pressure system and a cistern for water. So we did have a little better accommodation as far as the washroom facilities were. There was at least a built-in flush toilet that went, and they had a big hole downstairs, and you pumped it out, just out on the yard on the side. I don't know how sanitary all that was, but we pumped just like everybody else did that lived in that house. So. And it was a different community, though, because it was too close to Weyburn. It was just a hop, skip, and a jump. So everybody was going either to Regina or Weyburn or even Stoughton. And Bill made many trips to Stoughton because that was in his territory. So, and we did have a hospital there, and it was just down the street. And when the air ambulance would come, they'd taxi down in front of the detachment to the hospital, and that's where the patients were looked after. And we had a garden there, and we had a few hailstorms and things that were kind of scary. We were scared the windows were going to get popped out, but luckily we came through it. the gardens were ruined, but, and then like got involved with the church more there, and I was in the choir in Fillmore. But as far as social activities, it wasn't a place that had things going on like what Bengoff did. It would have been a harder detachment to go to if that was your first detachment and you weren't used to that kind of thing. But we still didn't have a two-way radio. Like you couldn't ever get a hold of Bill in the car. I mean, he's gone, he's gone. And so I still did the broadcasts there.
I was glad I'd been raised on the farm, for one thing, because things were pretty primitive. And we had the medical supplies when we were in Arctic Red River, and we would just wire the doctor to see what to do, you know, when someone got ill. And he'd say, give them a shot of penicillin, because penicillin was just out then. So I would do the ladies, and Ivan would do the men, you know. And after he pulled teeth, he also gave them a shot of penicillin. I never got left to do a lot. I think that some of the ladies really did get left. But I don't know, I was just part of the team, that's all. I don't know, I think people were a lot more relaxed there, for one thing. And when I think of, you know, today and how you have to, when I had my children, there was Dr. Christensen had come from Denmark, actually. He'd been a missionary doctor, and he worked for Indian Affairs. And when I was pregnant with my second one, he just gave me one push on the stomach. He said, everything's okay. And I don't know, that was a unique thing. And when we had our first child, we were in the hospital for a week, and it cost $5 a day. That was before Medicare. The doctor charged well, we gave him $50, but he gave $10 back for our son's bank account.
And in Fillmore, he was always after me to use big knives, big butcher knives. So I was doing something, and he got a call out to Stoughton. And it was in March, when it was all icy and wet and snow all around, and I cut my finger. And so here I was holding my finger so it didn't bleed. I couldn't phone any because I was holding my finger. So I had to wait for him to come home to take me over to the hospital. It was only half a block, but that was a long way when you're sitting here holding your finger. And I couldn't put my boots on or anything, so I didn't want to go out and run up to the hospital. So that was one time where I wished he'd hurry up and come back. But it was just little things like that you remember.
There was no doubt that we were going north. Yeah, he did. And I quite liked it, but I was really glad that I'd grown up on a farm, because you had to bake bread. And in the morning you'd get up and I'd think, I wonder if we're having company today or not, you know, because people would come down the river and they would just come and stay. And then there was a Roman Catholic father and brother in Arctic Red River, and we used to play bridge with them. And they had rhubarb, which was quite wonderful. So I would make the rhubarb pies. They'd supply the rhubarb, and I'd make the rhubarb pies. And then at Christmas, they made sacramental wine, and they brought us a bottle of that. It was really good. And then there was Martha Cohen. Oh yes, that's another thing. She was going to marry a white man, so she came to see if she could borrow some clothes from me. So I lent her a dress and some sandals that I had. They weren't sort of wedding clothes, but anyway, she was quite happy to get them. And she made me a beautiful pair of duffel mitts. In return, I let her keep the dress, because I thought she should have her wedding dress. And different things happened. Sometimes we'd go out to the kitchen and there'd be we'd have visitors, you know, but you just got used to that, native visitors. And then when, some of them were really, really good-hearted people. And I know the first caribou that they got in Arctic Red, they brought us to heart, and that wasn't our favorite part, but that was their favorite part, so it was really nice of them to do it.
I've been loyal to the Heritage Center because I want to see it prosper and to be able to support themselves and really not be worried about where the next dollar's coming from. And I also support the Friends of the museum because I know that all the work that they've done and the money they've supported to keep things running the way they were. And I think that I hope the Heritage Center is in good grounds now and things won't be quite so tight as far as depending on the Friends. But I know if it's a funeral and they've asked for some other charity and it's a former member or a veteran, I always donate to the Heritage Center, to the Friends, so that it can be put to use where I know it is a good use.
Ivan loved history. He loved history and he loved organizing things. And that was a cause. And I can remember him writing the first bylaws. And he just worked and worked and worked doing those bylaws. And when we got the other ones at the meeting the other day, I thought, I have to take these home and compare them, which I haven't done, of course. But no, he was in with, he just lived it. He loved it, lived it and loved it. And we had such good times too with the friends that started it, the good friends we made forever. It was wonderful.